Hey everybody, welcome to On Deck, a podcast all about the Steam Deck. I'm Bill, that's Lloyd. How's it going, Lloyd?
Dude, it is going fantastic. It's Friday. We have tech to talk about. I can't wait, man. I'm actually really excited about this show. I'm excited about the Steam Deck, even though I was a little bit apprehensive at the start, but we can get into that when we start chatting.
Absolutely. So, for those of you that don't know, Lloyd and I, we do another show together called Stadia Cast. We have a YouTube channel, which you can find over at nerdnest.tv. We talk about games a lot. And if you want to check all that stuff out, head on over to nerdnest.tv. You can watch the video version of this podcast over there as well. This show is going to be probably like a limited run thing where we're talking about all of the news about the Steam Deck. And, if it turns out that there's lots to talk about, maybe we will continue this for the
Right.
long run. That remains to be seen. Today's episode is all about the hardware, the tech specs, the nitty gritty. Now, before we get started, I just want to say I am not that guy. Like I used to be back in the day when I used to build my own PC a billion years ago, and then I moved over to Mac, and I have a PC that I built for streaming and stuff like that. But basically, I went to like buildmeapc.com or whatever, and just looked for a build that other people were using. So I don't know all of that stuff. That's what we got Lloyd here for. Lloyd, my co-host, is going to tell us what all of this stuff means. So if you're like me and you find this stuff to be a little bewildering, that's what Lloyd's here to explain it. And if you know more than us, if you know more than both Lloyd and I, it wouldn't be tough for you to know more than me. But if you know more than Lloyd, and you're watching this on the YouTube channel, feel free to let us know in the comments down below if we get anything wrong or if we feel like we've left out an important detail. You agree with all that, Lloyd?
Yeah. So I have deeper technical knowledge than Bill, but no one has all the technical knowledge unless you work for like Tom's Hardware or a Nantech or something. So I have built many PCs in the past. I used to be a certified Apple and IBM technician, so I've taken apart computers and laptops and monitors and all this stuff, and I try to keep abreast on all the latest computer hardware, even though I don't build PCs anymore. So I have a good baseline knowledge, but I'll probably get things wrong, and we're not going to get upset if you correct us below in a nice way. Correct us below in the comments.
All right, so let's talk about the tech specs. I'm going to bring these up on screen as well. So over you can find this information over at steamdeck.com.
Right.
And we've got like this cool little drawing of the Steam Deck, which I think is very cool. Let's start with the processor. Now, they went with an APU, which is a combination CPU GPU, where they're kind of mishmashed together, and I'm assuming that they did that like for to save space and to increase the throughput or something like that. You want to
Right.
talk about this?
Yeah, so AMD calls what is normally called an SoC, a system on a chip, their APU. So AMD APU, they use that on all their processors. So the CPU part of the APU is a Zen 2 chip, very similar to chips that would be in, say, an Xbox Series or a PS4, except these are dialed down a fair bit. Steam or Valve rather is saying that they're using a custom AMD silicon. So basically, they're taking the current chip and kind of ramping it down a little bit. So this Zen 2 CPU has four cores and it has 8 threads, where I believe the standard Zen 2 chip in other systems would have double that. So that's not that bad, and it will range from 2.4 to 3.5 gigahertz, which is decent. Since they're using more of a mobile hardware design, a lot of the components of this thing can be ramped up or ramped down as needed by the OS. The OS can say, "Oh, we need more power." It ramps that stuff up and then ramps it down. Of course, the higher the clock speed goes, the more battery it uses.
Mhm.
The GPU that's built into this one uses 8 RDNA 2 compute units, which range from 1 to 1.6 gigahertz, which is a lot lower than when you would see everywhere else. And the big chunk about the tech specs that is leaving me kind of worried, not really worried, but I wonder how it's going to perform is the APU power consumption. They say that this thing is rated to use between 4 and 15 watts, which is pretty standard for mobile stuff. Like the Nintendo Switch, for example, uses around 10 watts, kind of on max draw. But if you take like the chip that is kind of, or the CPU, GPU, or just the GPU actually out of the system, and you compare it to something that would be similar to what you'd have in a PC, like an RX card from AMD would draw about 275 watts. So this thing, even though it might be using modern hardware, it's modern hardware that's been powered down a fair bit, for many reasons, but mainly so that you don't turn on the system and then your battery's dead.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So when you talk about you like you just made a direct comparison to traditional PC hardware, it's safe to say that because this there's going to be a billion people out there comparing it to it's like gaming on this thing. Do you
Right.
feel like that those are accurate, that we can really trust those numbers based on those comparisons, or because this is a custom chip we really don't know how it's going
Yeah.
to perform even if we have the numbers?
Yeah, we really don't know until, like, say, Digital Foundry has one in their hands and they do all the tests. They're one of the sites that I trust the most to kind of really get into the nitty gritty of hardware. The fact that it is based on like a modern CPU and GPU, but clocked down pretty hard. There's a lot of sites out there that are saying that it's going to have similar power to a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One, and people are like, "Oh my God, that's last gen," but that's a full system that's drawing like 200 watts as you have it plugged in. This thing's drawing 4 to 15. So getting that kind of power with, or that kind of a graphical and CPU power, compute power, without drawing that much power is going to be good. And the fact that the system, we'll get into that in a second, only has a 720p screen
Hmm.
means that you're not going to be playing games at 4K 60 frames a second on the actual handheld device. So possibly the 4 to 15 watt draw of the APU in total won't actually be that much of an issue because you're playing games with lower resolutions. So time will tell. Until we actually get this device in our hands, we won't know. But the CPU being similar to modern hardware, but really power level of last gen hardware, but then drawing less power and a smaller resolution screen, means that we really don't know, and we won't know until people have these in their hands and can do some tests.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the RAM. A lot like I made a video about well, it wasn't just about the RAM. It was kind of like a news update where I was telling people this is new information that we have about the Steam Deck, and of course, as
Right.
new information comes out, we'll of course have a talking head discussion about it here on the show. But I'll also be putting out videos on the YouTube channel, so make sure that you head on over there and subscribe. It was originally thought that we had 16 gigabits of LPDDR5 RAM that was dual channel. Turns out
Right.
that it's actually quad channel, which means it has a lot more bandwidth. I don't know that we need to go into too much detail about that, but
Sure.
when we talk about the fact that this is RAM that is shared between the CPU and the GPU instead of
Mhm.
having each having their own, what are your thoughts on that? Is 16 gigs enough since it's shared?
It's definitely. I don't see that being an issue personally. You're using lower resolution assets. You're running at 720p, less stuff that has to get jumped into or dumped into memory. This is 16 gigs of LPDDR5 RAM, which I don't believe is being used in any other device yet. Like I don't think there's motherboards that support this speed of RAM, which is a good thing because that means we're getting latest greatest technology that's built into this one, which is really great. 50 the tech specs say 5500 MTs quad 32-bit channel. Basically that just means that it does what they call, I believe, mega transfers is what they call, which basically means that it's sending and receiving multiple streams of data at the same time. So it means the RAM can be faster, and the fact that it's quad speed means it can do, it's twice as fast than what people originally thought when they put their first pre-orders in. So this is going to be good. Having shared GPU and CPU in the APU usually means that you have shared memory. That's kind of usually how it goes. I don't see that as anything that's going to hamstring the device, because yeah, your GPU is going to be using lower textures, outputting 720p, maybe rendering higher and then scaling down. I don't see us running into memory issues, but time will tell.
So let's take a look at the storage because that's really they put out three SKUs, which is a smart move because they've got
Yeah.
it at three different three different wallet levels, and the having that base SKU, a lot of people looked at that and they said 64 gigs of storage space, that's not going to be enough to do anything with. And then they all jumped to the higher levels. I went with the mid tier range. Did you also go with the mid tier, or did you go with the low one?
I went with the low one because
Okay.
I put in my pre-order. Maybe we'll talk about my apprehension a little bit. I saw the device and I was like, all the controls are at the top. Like, you're going to be holding it like this. It's going to be so unbalanced. And it wasn't until I watched, I think, the IGN video where people were actually physically holding the device. I'm like, oh, okay, it's as tall as a controller. So that's not going to be a problem. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to put my $5 in. I don't know if I'm going to want this device at launch, but it's a 6 months between now and when it will ship, and if I don't get a pre-order in now, I'm not getting one.
Yeah.
So I did the pre-order for the 64 gigabyte one, um, hoping that there'd be a way to do some internal upgrades, and it looks like that might be a thing that we're going to be talking about in the future when we get some more teardowns and other things that we can look at.
So you trust yourself to open this, crack this baby open, and actually do
Yeah.
some changes.
I used to take apart tiny little devices with magnifying glasses and do soldering right on. So yeah, I'm pretty confident in my skills. I'm a little bit older than I was when I used to do that stuff, so we'll see if I have the dexterity still. But I've been hanging out on the Reddit, reddit.com/r/Steamdeck, and there's people that are designing 3D printed holders for NVMe devices
Hmm.
that will just clip on your device. And I'm like, you know what? There's going to be some way to upgrade. And of course, there's always the micro SD that's built into the device as well.
Yeah, I don't trust myself to try that thing. I
Yeah.
tried to fix a Nintendo Switch Joy-Con that had some drift in it, and
Right.
that is now a pile of garbage. Like it only worked there were a couple of issues with the drift, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna order this kit off the internet, and I'm gonna watch a video online. And once I got the screws out, there was no putting it back together. So that's not for me. But let's talk about the upgrading thing, because it says here on steamdeck.com, it says all models use socketed 2230 M.2 modules, and then
Yep.
in parentheses there it says not intended for end user replacement. Now that doesn't mean that you can't replace it, but
Right.
that means that they're not going to make it easy,
Yeah.
and it's probably going to be tough to get to. But the fact that it's socketed,
Hmm.
that means that, like, it's not soldered to the board,
Correct.
which is what a lot of companies do when you're dealing with smaller form factor.
Yep.
Often they solder it to the board in order to make it as small as they possibly can. And Valve decided, you know what, it's going to be socketed. So sure, you're going to have a pile of screws in front of you, tiny little screws, and Lloyd's got his little magnifying glass out where he's trying to find something.
Right.
But you're going to be able to get to it and swap it out, and I think that that's really cool that they did that. That shows some forward thinking on their part.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that it uses a socket means that it's better for them because they have basically one SKU of a logic board they have to worry about. So that means that hopefully this thing will be solid because they have one internal piece of hardware that they can stress test instead of three different pieces of hardware that they have to stress test. And it also means that hopefully, as long as you can find an NVMe drive that is the same size as the one that is currently in the system, you'll be able to just drop any other one into it. These sockets are really easy to put stuff into. The fact that it's not soldered down, like you said, is huge. The real big question is it going to be easy to open with like four screws and like a little spudging tool, the little thing that you jam into the plastic to pop the little clips, Or is it something that you're going to basically have to you take a Dremel out and cut the back of your case out, right?
Hmm.
I would think by looking at some of the screenshots, it looks like it'll be easy to get into, but we won't know until the device comes out or people do teardowns. The other concern of mine about replacing the drive is if I take out the 64 gig drive that's in there, is the new one that I'm putting in going to be too hot? Is it going to have too much power draw? There's going to be a lot of parts of this formula to kind of figure out where what you should buy and where you should get it. So I'm going to be looking at all sorts of things before I do my upgrade. But the fact that it has like a high-speed micro SD card, and the fact that the original IGN video, they were playing every single game off the SD card,
Yeah.
not the internal memory, means that, you know what, maybe buying a 200 or a gigabyte, or sorry, a terabyte SD card and dropping in my system, maybe that's going to be the upgrade that I do. It's very rare that you find a piece of hardware like this that seems to be so upgradable and designed as a piece of PC hardware, not a consumer device that is sealed, given to the end user, and that's it. Of course, doing this upgrade is probably going to void your warranty, so you may want to wait until you're already out of warranty. But the fact that upgrades are even a distinct possibility is something that's super exciting for me.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to, like, we got to the stuff that I think most people were probably excited about. I want to talk about the stuff that I'm excited about, and that
Sure.
is the controls and input. When I saw it, my immediate thought was, I played the Wii U. The Wii U is one of the most comfortable consoles that I've ever held in my hand. That
Okay.
is an incredibly comfortable device. So having all of the controls up at the top, I was fine with. I'm excited about it. In fact, somebody did like this drawing where and it was like a really cool, like, anatomical drawing of like the hand, and they showed the hand over top of the Steam Deck, and they showed like the arc of your thumb, and you like the touchpad, the stick, the buttons, and then on the other side the touchpad, the stick, and the D-pad. They're
Right.
all on that arc for where your thumbs are. So I think that they've done a lot of research into how this thing is going to uh, be played, and I'm very excited for how the controls are lined up. Let's
Right.
talk about those controls, because I did a video showing people how to use a Steam controller on New World,
Right.
so people would understand that those touchpads are not simply for mouse inputs. They do so much more than that.
Mm.
And the ones that they've got in the Steam Deck are actually better than
Right.
the ones that are in the Steam controller. So basically, it says that it has, first off, well, actually, let's talk about the trackpads. It says two 32.5 millimeter square trackpads with haptic feedback, 55% better latency compared to the Steam controller,
That's great.
which I didn't never thought that felt like there was any latency, but whatever. And then pressure sensitivity for configurable click strength. So that means, for those of you that don't know, the Steam controller has a thing where you can push on those pads and they'll click, like when you click in your stick when you're
Right.
playing a game. You can do that, but on this, you get to decide how hard do you have to push to get that click, which I think is really cool. Have you
That
ever
is.
had a chance to use the Steam controller, Lloyd?
No, I've never used a Steam controller, and I had no clue that the Steam controller was so cool until I watched your video. I know we've been podcasting for years. We've done shows prior to starting Stadia Cast, and
Hmm.
you've always talked about the Steam controller is my favorite controller. I'm just like, okay, but that's just Bill being Bill. All right, let him go have fun in the corner with the Steam controller. But I watched your video, and I'm like, holy crap, that is a cool piece of hardware. If Valve would have marketed the device and just used your video to kind of show it off, I would have bought one in a heartbeat. So I'm actually really excited about that. I didn't know what those squares were at first when I saw the video. I'm like, why would they just put a design on the plastic? That's really weird. And then I was like, oh wait, they're trackpads. Okay, that totally makes sense. And then looking at what you did in that video, and then looking at the Steam pad, that might be for a lot of people, that might be your main source of input for a lot of these games. So I'm really excited about that, even though I've never used a Steam controller.
Yeah, so let's move on and talk about the haptics. The haptics of the touchpads on the Steam controller are absolutely fantastic. It feels like you are pushing a thing around with your thumb.
Okay.
It's the weirdest thing. So like you turn on the haptics, and as you move your thumb over, you feel like this little vibration underneath. Anybody who's used like an Android phone where you type on the when you're typing and you feel
Right.
like that little boop 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 every, and
Yeah.
oh boy, don't clip that. Every time that you type, that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, and it's really
Right.
good that it has that, but it also says that it has HD haptics, which makes me think
Mm.
maybe they are stealing some of that stuff from the PS5 control. What's it called? The Dual Sense, I think.
Yeah, or maybe the Nintendo Switch controller that has
Hmm.
HD rumble built in, where you can kind of feel throughout the whole device when you're tilting it. If you're the whole big thing that they showed off at the start is like there's ice cubes in your controller and you can shake it around. But if they can take that little tiny that haptic thing that's just a really small part of your controller, but put it underneath that pressure sensitive touchpad and make it better. I'm actually really excited for that. Something that would be kind of like a Frankenstein cross between the Nintendo Switch HD Rumble and the adaptive controls of the PS5 DualSense, I think is what it's called,
Hmm.
controller. If they could have some sort of like weird Frankenstein baby, I think that could be really cool. And the fact that it's built in and something that they're adding at like initially, this isn't like a new version, means that they've been thinking about this for a while. They've been looking at what the industry is doing and adapting and grabbing stuff that they want to put into this device, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, as far as those haptics go, keep in mind that on the Nintendo Switch, those haptic motors are only in the Joy-Cons
Mm.
part.
Yep.
Because these controllers on the Steam Deck are attached, like they are
Yep.
attached to the device, that means that those things can live anywhere. And so they could really make it much better than the Nintendo Switch because they have so much more room. They could
Right.
put bigger motors in because this thing
Yep.
is really thick and chunky and heavy. We'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But all of that means that you can do a lot more when you have more room. And having all that room, I'm very
Yep.
excited to see what they can do with the haptics. I'm also interested in, all of the things that I said that you can do with the Steam controller. Obviously, you can do on the Steam Deck, but the
Mm.
Steam Deck has things that the Steam controller doesn't have, like a big 7-inch LCD, 800p. What are the actual 1280 by 800? Weird aspect ratio. 1280 by 800 touch screen. I
Right.
wonder if there will be haptics behind that as well, or if you'll be able to do the same kind of things that you can do with those touchpads with the touch screen. So I can touch a spot on the screen and have a little menu pop up that I customize and then say, all
Right.
right, do this. That would give me so many more options. It's just like my mind is just spinning at the idea of all the ways that you can customize the way that you play your game, which is very
Right.
exciting to me.
Yeah, like again, after watching your Steam controller video, I had no idea that you could have multiple different types of options tied to each touchpad, and the fact that the thumbsticks on this device have a capacitive touch thing on top of it, so that could be a button. Just touching it as a button, clicking it in as a button. It's ridiculous the number of inputs that they've put into this device, which makes sense. I mean, they're replacing a keyboard that has 101 buttons on it, and it's like, okay, we need to squeeze as much of that into this device. But it seems like they're doing it in a really smart way.
Yeah, I did a live stream on the YouTube channel the day that they made the announcement, and which is like blew me away how many people showed up. There were a couple of hundred people that were there, and they were all really excited about this device. And one of the
Right.
things that I kept coming back to during that live stream was that capacitive thumbstick. Like I couldn't wrap my head around what you would want that for, but somebody finally had left a comment on the YouTube video, and they said, "You know what? I think it's so that when you put your thumb on the thumbstick, you don't get any spurious inputs when your like part of your hand hits the
Mm,
touchpad." So,
yeah, palm rejection that they do on an iPad or something similar.
yeah, exactly. Like that's a
Right.
big deal. Having that, having like because the thumb pad or the trackpad is right underneath where your thumb would be, and you don't want accidentally want to hit like that pad. And if that were to happen, people would just turn it off and never ever use it. So having that capacitive input on the stick, I think that's probably what it's for. Like the idea that you're touching the stick and the game and the thing knowing that you're touching the stick, I don't think of any use for that other than turning something else off. Like somebody said, maybe it's to turn on the gyro, and it does have gyro, which is awesome.
Right.
Maybe it's to turn on the gyro when you're touching that.
Yeah.
Maybe, but I don't
Yeah.
know that you would want the gyro on when you're using the thumbstick at the same time. So I don't know.
It could be because that software that you were showing as you were editing your all your buttons on your Steam controller, maybe it's possible that you could have your right thumbstick would be the camera while your fingers on it. Otherwise, it's the gyros, the camera when your fingers off it. So you move your finger from the thumbstick to the buttons, and then next thing you know, you can move the camera just by moving the gyros around. The really cool thing about that controller software is you can save all your profiles, and even better, you can look at a huge library of profiles. So whenever a new game comes out, I'm sure there's going to be a million and one different profiles that you can kind of look into, and just having like a billion buttons and touch surfaces and gyros and haptics and you name it means that I'm sure every game that's on Steam, there's going to be a way to control it with controllers or the touchpad that is going to feel normal to someone that is used to playing mobile hardware like the Nintendo Switch. It's probably going to be tough for people that are used to using mouse and keyboard only as their input source. But for people that are moving from consoles back, I think it's going to be a nice little kind of half step between what they're used to and then what the keyboard and mouse people are used to.
Yeah, and the other thing about this is that it has all of the inputs that anybody could want, I think,
Yeah,
except for a mouse and keyboard, which you can plug in if you
you
want.
can.
But
Yep.
like the Steam controller, one of the reasons that it didn't really take off is because people looked at it and they said, there's no D-pad, there's only one stick. I
Right.
would not be able to figure this out. I wouldn't be able to use it. I wouldn't be able to get my brain to understand it. And so I'm not going to
Right.
try it. If you sell exactly this, but with a D-pad and a stick, people would try it and then they would start using those pads and understanding how great they are.
Right.
But because the Steam controller didn't have those things as an option, people wouldn't like they said, "All right, I'm not going to buy it." And sure, there was also like a lawsuit, which is a reason why Valve kind of abandoned the Steam controller, but we're not going to focus on that. The
Right.
fact that the Steam Deck has two sticks, a D-pad, all of the things that are in every other controller out there
Hmm.
means that those two pads are going to get used way more than they ever would otherwise because people will take a chance on it. Most people will look at that thing and they'll say, "You know what? Even if the pads suck, I still got all the regular controls and I'll be fine." But then they'll try those pads and they'll realize how much better they are than regular thumbsticks.
Right. Yeah. I looked at it and I'm like, I'm never using those. And again, I don't want to harp on people. You should really go look at the video that Bill put up. It's fantastic. I actually see myself maybe primarily using that for because of the other options that it would give me. So yeah, I'm really excited about this thing.
All right, let's move on to the display. Why do you think they went with with such a weird resolution? Why didn't they
Um,
just go with 720p instead of 800?
I think it's if I had to guess, instead of going 16 by 10 instead of 16 by 9 allows you to have a chunk of the screen on the bottom that you can devote to things. Because if you look at when they go into kind of like the game listing, there's always like a bar at the bottom that is telling you things. So maybe they're like, okay, if we just put like a 16 by 9 screen in here, we're gonna have to keep popping stuff up above the game. But if we do 16 by 9 for the game that's running and then leave a bit at the bottom that we can use for other things, kind of like Android phones these days don't have physical buttons, they have the little bar on the bottom that
Hmm.
is actually part of the touch screen. I'm thinking maybe that is the way they did that, or maybe they're looking at the, I don't know, gigaflops, which isn't a word, of data of people that have played games on Steam, and they're like, okay, this is the most common resolution. It's 720p stretched to this particular monitor, and they're like, okay, people like to play that way. We can put a little bit more information on the screen, like I don't know, 80 pixels worth of more information on the screen. That's not that much, and maybe they went that way. It is weird. I don't think I've ever seen a 1280 by 800 screen for sale. Maybe inside of like cars when you have like a screen in your stereo as part of your car, but yeah, I don't know. I'm really interested to see how they're going to use that.
So it occurs to me while you were saying that, it occurs to me perhaps they did it. Remember that part I said a second ago where I said, "Oh, what if they make the touchscreen do some of that Steam input stuff?
Right.
What if they can put little buttons at the bottom of the screen
Yep.
of that, like you use those extra 80 pixels, that like right there, you've got a
Hmm.
whole bunch of extra buttons that you otherwise wouldn't have." And that didn't occur to me until just now. So, watch this space. We'll find out more as time goes on. Every
Right.
time that we saw somebody like I can't remember exactly where it was. There was one of the little videos that they were showing off. They were like somebody was playing a game and they got a message and it did not pop up on the bottom like that. Like
Right.
you were saying, it popped up
Yeah,
over on
laid
the
over.
right hand side, and then
Yeah.
they were able to open that up. So I don't think that what you were saying is what they're going for, but it would be really cool to always have like a thing on the bottom of, hey, instead of covering up my gameplay, Lloyd just logged in and is playing Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah.
Send him a meme or something.
Yeah, I think that that space would be used more when you're in the menus, not so much when you're in a game, because all the games that they showed, they look like they're full screen.
Mhm.
But if you look at the menu, kind of the menu screenshot, there's an information bar on the bottom that always stays there. It seems weird that they would add 80 pixels to your screen just for that. So I don't know. Maybe they're just trying to squeeze as much video possibility into this device, and the fact that it's running PC games, you can have some really weird resolutions in a PC game,
That's
and
true.
if the game supports it, you can play it. I'm sure that if you're running 720p, and it's only outputting 720p, it'll be letterboxed on the top or bottom by 40 pixels, or maybe they'll slide it to the top with a little bit more information. And the fact that it is running Steam OS 3, meaning maybe there's some other software that people can write to do other useful things on that on screen when the game's running, because it is a device that is pretty much open for everybody to play around with, which is different than pretty much any other piece of gaming hardware.
Yeah, it's a 7-inch diagonal screen, which is the same size as the Switch OLED
Yep.
model, but different than the OLED model. It is an LCD screen. I know that there's people who are irritated by that, but you
Yeah.
know what? When you're looking at 720p, I think it's going to be fine. I understand that OLED is better, but I think LCD is going to be fine. My only issue is the brightness is 400 nits.
Right.
The current I when I did first talk when I did my first video about the Steam Deck, I accidentally said that the Switch was around 380 nits, and it's actually 318. I just remembered the number wrong.
Right.
But the Switch, not the original launch Switch, but the Switch that I have, with is the first update Switch, that is about 318 nits. This is 400 nits, which is a little bit better. For those of you that don't know, nits is like a measurement of brightness.
Right.
What do you think about that number 400?
I think 400's fine. I'm just doing a quick Google search just to see current iPads. So the iPad Air fourth generation, that's the iPad that I just bought.
Hmm.
It has a maximum of 500 nits, and that screen gets really, really bright. So it's a little bit less than that, but more than what the Switch is. So I think that's going to be fine. The fact that it is an LCD though means going to play this thing outside is going to be tough with that level of brightness, and the fact that it's an LCD. If it was an OLED, you'd have a little bit better performance there. You'd have a little bit better separation between the blacks on the screen and the colors, the really bright parts of your screen.
Hmm.
Um, but it's 720p. It's a portable device. I think it's going to be perfectly fine. I don't think anybody that I've ever heard of, that I know personally or has listened to my podcast and commented, has ever said that they hate the Switch screen because it's too dim. So I think this is going to be fine. The higher the brightness, the more energy it uses. So they were playing a fine game of balance to see what would look the best, what would have the best performance, but also what would draw the least amount of power.
Yeah, let's let well, speaking of the screen, The most expensive one, this really irritated me that they put this only on the most expensive one. It
Right.
has a premium anti-glare etched glass. I don't know how much that costs to do, but I really wish that that premium anti-glare etched glass was on all three models.
I do too.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a thing. Can you like get like a screen protector that is anti-glare etched glass, and is that going to make it look worse since it's
Um,
like I have a screen protector on my Switch,
is it a
and like
glass
it's
one?
it's a glass one. It's not
Yeah.
plastic, it's glass. And so I'm really happy with it, but like it's not anti-glare or anything, and I
Right.
always worry about like spending money on a thing like that and then making the screen look not as good. Like on my
Right.
phone, I don't have um a screen protector on my phone because I want my phone to look nice. I don't want to have that little cutout going around it.
Right.
So what do you think? Can you do that in post?
I think so. I think there'll probably be vendors that are going to sell a glass screen protector that has anti-glare coating on it. Anti-glare will not get in the way, like say a polarization. If you put a polarization on a screen protector, that would interfere with the polarization layers that are inside the LCD. But anti-glare is just a top coating, so I wouldn't be surprised if they start selling stuff like that, because there's going to be a market there for the people that didn't buy the big daddy version of the Steam Deck. There's going to be people that want to drop $50 or $40 or $20 or whatever it's going to cost to get a really high quality glass screen protector that will then have the anti-glare coating on it.
All right, for connectivity, they got Bluetooth built right in. Nintendo,
Nice.
take that. So you know you're going to be able to use your Bluetooth headphones with this,
It's
no
fantastic.
problem. Which is very good. It's got
Mhm.
Wi-Fi. There's just nothing really interesting there to talk about. Let's move on to audio. It's got two microphones.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? One to listen to the. I don't know what are the two microphones for?
It's pretty common on devices that are accepting audio to have multiple microphones, so they can properly do rejection of background noise, because they can hear what your voice is. They can do some processing to compare the volume of your voice between the two, and it's like, okay, this is obviously the voice. We're gonna cancel everything else out. That would be why my thoughts are why there's a dual microphone in there. I don't think I've ever seen one on a gaming device. That's usually something that would be on a phone or part of a laptop. So this would be interesting, but yeah, it's probably just for noise cancellation for when you're having voice chats with your friends while playing games.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe you'll use the built-in microphones, but honestly, if you're playing a game with your friends, you're probably going to have like either a Bluetooth headset or a headset plugged in, and it does have a headset jack on there.
Yeah.
You'll probably have it plugged in, and that device will probably have a microphone on it. So you most of the time, like I don't understand why you would want to have a microphone built in anyway, because my experience would be that that microphone would pick up the sound from the system
Yeah, and that would
and
be what
make.
the dual microphone would start to combat, because it would hear your voice compared to stuff that's coming out of the speakers. Yeah, it I would never do this. I would never play a game with the volume on and have a voice chat with a friend. But this gives just another piece of utility for this device. You don't need to add a headset, a microphone, or Bluetooth headsets to play games with your friends. And I'm sure that it's running. You can run Windows on it. That was one thing that they said. Who
Yep.
knows? Maybe people will buy these and use it for a Skype device. I really doubt it, but it's adding additional bits of hardware that can be used by games, can be used by gamers, can be customized with how you use them, more than pretty much any other handheld device I've ever seen. So I think they're just including it just in case.
There you go. I fully expect to get Nintendogs clones on the device so that people
Yeah.
will be walking around screaming at their Steam Deck, stupid Elgato and their Stream Deck.
Hmm.
I'm gonna say that wrong forever.
Hmm.
Screaming at their Steam Decks, trying to get the dog to sit or whatever. We're
Right.
gonna see that, or the games where you blow on the device in order to
Yeah.
get the game to do something. All
Get the
right, let's
airplane in
talk
the air.
about what's that?
to keep your airplane in the air or whatever
Yeah.
mini game you're playing. Yeah.
All right, battery. It's a
Mhm.
portable device. Battery is very, very important. It's got a 40-watt-hour battery. They say
Sure.
between 2 and 8 hours of gameplay. I mean, I don't know about you, Lloyd. I'm an old man. I generally tend not to play games for more than 2 hours anyway. Like I play, I set it
Sure.
down, I go do something else, I come back. I'm sure that there are a bunch of other people out there that will sit down and play for 30 hours straight because you people are crazy. But 2 to 8 hours of gameplay. What do you think about that?
I think that's fine for a portable device. That's similar to kind of what the launch day Switch would give you if you're playing Breath of the Wild. They say rated for 4 hours. Nah, you weren't getting more than
And
two
two
hours
and a
on that.
half.
Exactly. So I think this is fine. The, yeah, it's all going to depend what your usage is, and the fact that it has USB-C. I mean, you can just plug in a power bank. If 2 to 8 hours isn't enough, you can plug that in. I was listening to a video. I can't remember which one it was, and Valve was talking about playing Portal on this device, and they say that if you play Portal at 30 frames a second, you're going to get 5 hours, but if you played at 60 frames a second, you're going to get 3 hours out of it. So users are going to be able to kind of dial in sort of their best use case with this device, saying, okay, well, if I want to, I have a long trip, I'm on a plane, I'm going to be in the air for 3 hours, I really want to play for the whole entire flight, so I'm going to dial down the graphic quality, or I'm going to change it from 60 frames a second to, or an unlocked frames per second to a locked 30 frames a second, to kind of scrape a little bit more battery power out of it. It'll be interesting to see at launch if anybody ever gets 8 hours other than just like looking at the device on the main menu, right?
Right. Yeah. I think 8 hours is, I don't know. Valve seems to be pretty
Could be playing
transparent with
Uno.
what's going on here, but 8 hours seems unlikely.
Yeah, you could be playing Uno or Hearthstone or something with all the animations turned off, so just like your things just appear in front of you.
Uh huh.
Maybe you'll get 8 hours out of that.
All right, so they've got micro SD for storage, which I think is fantastic. That like they could have just said, all right, you get these three storages and you're all done. But no, they said, you know what, we're gonna let you put in SD cards in order to expand your storage as much as you want. And I can't believe that like I said this in that one of the videos that I posted. I cannot believe that Valve brought the systems to IGN and they had all of the games on the SD card, which is probably what is going to happen in the real world. Is most people are just going to be playing off SD cards.
Right.
And Valve was like, "These are great. It works fine." And they were like, "Oh yeah, by the way, that's on SD." What? I mean,
Yeah.
I can't believe it.
Yeah, that's kind of a little tricky thing to do, where they're like, yeah, I wonder how the performance on the SD is going to be. Well, you played it for the last 5 hours. Really, really smart for them to do that. The fact that it supports expansion through SD is going to be great. They talked a little bit how they're going to manage that, and how all that stuff's going to go. I listened to a developer interview, and it seems really good. And the fact that you can hook up a USB-C device for an external display, you can put pretty much any device into it through
Yeah.
USB-C, which is really great. And they said alt mode support, which is interesting, and also 8K 60 hertz or 4K at 120
Yeah.
hertz. I guess that's more if you're using the built-in like SteamOS like kind of computer version. I don't think anybody's going to be playing games on this device at 4K 120 hertz while it's plugged into the dock. Just there isn't going to be enough power in the GPU, because they haven't said anything about an enhanced GPU CPU speeds when it's docked. So like that was one of the big things with the Nintendo Switch. When it's docked, there's increased power. They haven't said anything about that. Possibly it's included. We don't know, obviously, because they haven't said it. But if you're going to be playing a 4K game with 15 watts of draw on your APU, that's going to be a bad day. So yeah, it's interesting. I love that it supports all this stuff, supports USB-C hubs. Like they're not trying to sell you a Valve branded everything and only
Right.
work with those devices. They're making this as open and true to kind of the PC community as they possibly could, which is very, very cool.
Just heading off any comments that people are saying down below, Lloyd is completely aware that the Nintendo Switch doesn't get more powerful when you dock it. It simply is limiting itself so that it doesn't burn through its battery when it's undocked.
Which is the same thing, really. It
But
really
it,
is the
it
same
is the
thing.
same thing,
They
but
clock it down.
but there's a lot of people who, when they see the Nintendo Switch and then they hear that you get more power when it's docked, they think, oh, there's like a thing in the dock
Right.
that like gives
Definitely
it
not.
more power. That's not
No.
what happens.
No, it's like at the top talk when or at the top of the when we were talking about the specs when I said that your clock speeds can go from whatever the numbers are 2.4 to 3.5 gigahertz for the CPU or 1 to 1.6 for the GPU. On the Nintendo Switch, you would get the 1.6 when you're docked. You get the 1 when you're not docked. And we don't know if this device is going to do that.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the size and the weight of this thing. So, real quick, its measurements: 298 millimeters by 117 millimeters by 49 millimeters. This
Mhm.
thing is big. It
It's a
is a
chunky boy.
really, really big system. In fact, I would say the best comparison for this thing is probably. Do you remember that mech style game that came out on the Nintendo Switch with like the heavy metal music? I can't remember. Demon X
Oh,
Machina.
Demon X Machina.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. They had like specific controllers that shipped for that game that were essentially somebody took a sawed a Nintendo Switch Pro controller in half and slapped it onto the Joy-Cons on the side. And
Right.
looking at that, the Demon X Machina, I should have put it up on screen, but I didn't think of it ahead of time. The Demon X
Mm.
Machina controller on the
Yep.
Nintendo Switch looks to be about the same size as the Steam Deck. What do you think about the size of the Steam Deck? We'll talk about
I
weight separately.
Now that I actually like at the start, I'm like, are you people gonna be like pinching it at the top? Like, why are the controls at the top? It makes no sense. But actually seeing people hold it, I think it's gonna be fine. I did a paper mock-up just to kind of hold it and kind of see what it's how it's gonna feel and what the screen's gonna look like. I think it's gonna be fine. I almost bought those controllers, the Hori Split Pad Pro that you just put on the screen, just because I like having like a chunkier thing to kind of hold on to.
Mhm.
Yeah, the Steam Deck is nothing if not chunky, so that's going to be good. It's going to be a little bit more comfortable for people that have bigger hands. You're not going to need like a child's hands to kind of hold it comfortably, which is a good thing. The weight, on the other hand, though, like 670 grams almost,
Mhm.
that is heavy. That's going to be a heavy device to kind of hold constantly. You're going to get really tired holding it for that long. So I'm going to see a lot of videos of people kind of holding it, resting it on their lap while they're playing, or resting it on a desk while they're playing.
Mhm.
Because yeah, 669 grams is that's, as you said, it's a chunky boy of a
Yeah,
device.
it's almost two Nintendo Switches as far as the weight goes. Now, this again, where they put all of the controls at the top, means that all of that weight is supported with your hand. If the controls are at the bottom, then you have that almost like a lever of the weight pulling down out of your hands, and so you're kind of fighting to hold it up. But because you're
Right.
holding it with those controls at the top, I think that the 669 grams a little scary to hear, but
Yeah.
I think it's probably going to feel
Well,
okay
you
because the
have
controls are at the top.
you have an iPad Pro. Do you have a 12-inch iPad Pro?
12.9
Yeah.
iPad Pro from 2000
Yeah.
something. It's
So
18.
that's about 290 or 280 grams, or sorry, 680 grams in weight. So if you can hold that, that's about the weight of what the Steam Deck is going to be. So it's not a crazy amount, but when you're used to playing on the Nintendo Switch a lot, which is about half, it that sounds a little bit scary. So I mean, real world experience will kind of will give you a better idea whether it's something that's going to be comfortable for you or not. So as we get closer to launch, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more people talking about the weights and the dimensions and all that stuff.
Yeah, the difference, like speaking of the iPad, the big difference with this iPad, if I hold it in the middle, if like I
Mhm.
got my hands on the side and I hold it in the middle like this, super comfortable. I could probably hold it all day.
Yep.
Holding it with my hands at the bottom or my hands at the top, uncomfortable. But this is also a lot like taller.
Half height. Yeah, it's like half height almost
Yeah,
compared to it when it's on its side. So I
exactly.
I think it's going to be absolutely fine. It sounds a heck of a lot worse when you look at the numbers. I'm sure in real world experience, it's going to be fine.
All right, let's move on to the dock. They said that they do have an official dock, although they don't have a price for that yet, and it is sold separately. But the official dock contains, let me hit this button here, HDMI 2.0, power in, Ethernet, USB 3.1, and two USB 2.0 ports, and then, of course, USB-C cable that goes to the Steam Deck.
Right.
Um, uh, HDMI 2.0 or DisplayPort 1.4.
Mhm.
What do you think about that? Not going with 2.1 like the latest HDMI version.
I don't know. Possible that it could be software updated if that's going to be a limiting factor in the future. I'm not. I don't see an issue there at all with the device. About the only thing that I see as a problem is the ridiculous thing that the USB-C ports on the top of it. So you have this like little like bunny ear thing that you kind of pop up and plug it in when it's in the dock. Unlike the Nintendo Switch, where you just kind of seat it in the dock and
Mhm.
that's it. If I had to make one suggestion for changing the hardware, that would be my biggest suggestion. Put another USB-C port on the bottom that you can then use for a dock, or
I
use
would
it while
actually
you're
not do
docking.
that. I would just say you dock it upside down.
Yeah, or do it that way. That would be pretty hilarious as well. Yeah, I like I like the fact that they're going to be selling a dock, because you know it's going to be officially supported. But yeah, it's I'm sure there's going to be a million and one things that are available on Amazon or AliExpress that you're going to be able to buy, and they'll be just as usable. And hopefully this won't have the bricking issue that the Nintendo Switch did at launch. Hopefully they're using standards compliant USB-C in the Steam Deck. I would assume that they are.
Yeah. All right. Well, those are all of the hardware stuff, everything that you wanted to know about the hardware of the Steam Deck. I'm sure
Mhm.
that there were things that we missed. If we did, and you're watching this on the YouTube channel, leave a comment down below to let us know anything that we missed, and maybe we'll do either a video about it or we'll talk about it in a future episode. But this has been episode 1 of On Deck, a podcast all about the Steam Deck. Thank you all for listening. Lloyd, tell everybody goodbye.
All right, everybody, take it easy, and we'll see you here on the next episode of On Deck.